Hi there, it's me, Manuel Garcia, and for today's topic, I chose reforming copyright law. So to begin, what am I really talking about? Music copyright is the area of copyright we're going to be going over today. And the major issue that's pressing, I guess, all throughout when it comes to the music industry as a whole, it comes to the artists not being fairly compensated by the streaming industry, which is, the major two players is Apple Music and Spotify, but there's also a bunch of others like Pandora, YouTube Music, but they all have the same issue. And so a lot of artists recently have been speaking out publicly saying that the government has to take a role in order to help them get fairly compensated for their work because it's unfair. But like anything, it has to start from the ground up. There would have to be a federal law passed through the government and would have to start first, well, through a committee technically, but then eventually it would get to our bicameral Congress. So, what is a bicameral Congress? It talks about that the Congress is made up of two parts. One being the U.S. House of Representatives, which is basically the population of a state. It's given a certain amount of representatives divided into districts. You know what I mean? Versus the Senate, it's literally just two senators from each state. So you can see. Why do we have a bicameral Congress? It's basically to ensure that through first the House it goes through to ensure that it's wanted by a majority of the people, but second through the Senate to ensure that it's not just the to make sure that not only do the people want it, but all the states want it as well. So ensuring that it's also what majority of the population wants and what majority of the union wants. But we also have to remember that there's a lot of people that are going to influence it, like committees and leadership. So on the left, we have John Thune. He's the majority leader for the Republicans in the Senate. And then we have Chuck Schumer, who's a minority leader for the Democrats in the Senate. And then followed by the Speaker of the House. He has a really important role. He's the tiebreaker. So it's important to remember him because usually, because of how split in the middle it is right now, or especially when it comes to like when the Senate's really split, the House is really split, he helps with the tiebreaker. And his name is Mike Johnson, and he's a Republican. Also, we have to remember there are a bunch of influences when it comes to members of Congress when they vote. The biggest, oh, I would like to say it's the biggest usually, but that's not always the case, is the people themselves when it comes through publicly advocating through protests, demonstrations, or just speaking out. That could really push members of Congress to vote for whatever side they're speaking for. And when it comes to this topic, especially as a bunch of celebrities, musicians, this would definitely be something that's really wanted by the people just because they understand it's like, well, I don't want to run out of music. But we also have to take into account another group of people who have a big influence on the decision making, which would be lobbying interest and lobbying and interest groups in general. The reason why I have to include this is because a lot of the time when it comes to the donations that are given or to the certain funding that's given to members of Congress could really be shaped by these lobbying and interest groups. These are also people that help set up those type of protests with the with activists. Also, we have to understand the separations of power. So I included a photo of here a law getting signed in, you know, into law versus what our second option is, a veto. So basically, we have to understand that if the president if it gets all the way passed through Congress and eventually the president gets it, he has the option of either signing it into law or sending it back to Congress by vetoing it. There's a way to work around this. If the Senate is able to get to a two-thirds majority on the law, they could override the veto, and then it would become law. But that's something really hard to do, and it's really only happened a few times. But let's say the president's like, I really like that law. But then the job of the executive branch is to enforce the laws. So in this case, how would he do it? Through the FTC, which is the Federal Trade Commission, he could use that. to ensure that all the publishing platforms follow the law, or through the copyright office. This is really not well mentioned a lot because when people think of copyright, they don't necessarily think of music, but the president could use either to help enforce the law. So, what's the conclusion of this? Basically, it's just to have awareness into how the laws work and how they become law. Because with AI on the horizon, we're definitely going to see a lot more legislation happening when it just comes to new things. Because as the farther we go into the future, new problems will arise that need solutions. And when it comes to the federal level, the best way is through a law. So, staying aware of this could help ensure that we all have an understanding of how our government works. Thank you, and that's it.